It does something to the environment when we join together singing how good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. And it kind of fits in with the beginning of Vayakel, the beginning of this parsha where Moses brings the people together. He creates a holy congregation. He builds the Mishkan. You know, we just sang Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. You guys all know that word, those words, because you sing them all the time. Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem is typically translated as renew our days as in days of old. But Kedem is also a reference to the Garden of Eden. And so the prayer is like, make our days like they were when we were in Eden. And you know what was in Eden? Perfection. And then I thought, why did I say that to her? There's no such thing as perfection. But we aspire for that which is better, for that which is good, for that which is sweet. Whenever sitting down to write a sermon, I'm almost always caught by the first or second word, which is typically the name of the parsha, Vayakel, and Moses gathered. He gathered the people and he created a kehillah, a congregation and a community. The context, as you heard, is that the people were building the Mishkan, a sanctuary in the wilderness. And Moses gathered the people together because he wanted to tell them something about this sanctuary. The sanctuary would be the focal point of their lives. It would be their connection to each other, and it would be their connection to God. But before he goes into that, he makes it very clear that they'll be building, but there is a time, and in spite of how important that building is, that they can't build. That's Shabbat. For Shabbat is, as Abraham Joshua Heschel taught us, a sanctuary in time. And God may be found, or rather evoked in the sanctuary, and God may be found amongst the people and their connection to each other. But ultimately, we do find God when we make time special and holy. The capacity to create that holy time is as important as the capacity to create a holy space. And so here we are. I don't know if you know this. I'm moving on to a bit of a different subject here. But it's known that after the Shoah, when thousands and thousands of Jewish refugees and survivors had no place to go, they were put in DP camps, displaced people. These are people whose spirits were almost totally crushed. Many of them they may be amongst us, or they may be our parents. Many of them lost entire families, parents and children. And often they looked rather emaciated, they were weak, and they were sick. And yet, it's been reported that there were about 50 births per 1,000 people. That is about the highest birth rate known. It was known as the baby boom in the DP camps. Why was that? And how did it happen? It seems that it was a response not only to the immediate past and to the desire for survival, but it was an expression about a faith in the future of these Jewish families and in Jewish life. Women and men who had lost so much were not going to cave in to despair. I saw a young couple leaving our preschool this week. They had picked up their 2 children and they had come in separate cars. The wife was obviously very pregnant. So she got into her car with 1 child, and the husband, he hung behind because he wanted to speak to me about something. And he asked, "What do you think, Rabbi? Is there something wrong with me? I'm not feeling the excitement of having a 3rd child. I know that our lives are quite blessed and they're so full. I also feel that we work so hard, we're so busy all the time, and then we get home and there's no relief. But more than that," he said, "I'm looking at the world around us. Would you want to bring a child into this world?" he asked me. with so much threatening us, and I know there are a lot of young adults who are asking themselves that question. Why are we bringing another child into this world? He asked me. And I looked him in the eyes and I saw that he was feeling great angst. And I told him I understand the question, I can feel the question. And I also told him about my experience of having a third child. And I said to him, this will be the greatest contribution that you can make to this world at this time. This will be the greatest contribution you can possibly make. And that he's lucky, that he can provide for 3 kids and his family will be completed by this new baby. But I also said to him, it's not going to be easy, because 3 is much more than 2, and such is life. I said sometimes it's hard to believe in the future. But that's one of those issues that we Jews, as human beings, who know we have so many choices, know that we are not allowed to choose. We have to believe in the future. We have to choose life. And when we choose life, we choose hope. I went into my office and I immediately thought about something connected from this week's Parsha. Just like the statistics that came from the DP camps of an explosion of births, or this story of my friend, this morning's section of the Torah points to forms of life-affirming resistance in very difficult times. The Parsha offers continued insight into the construction of the Mishkan, and at times it feels a little boring. But when we read it, and when we bring commentary into it, we then begin to find incredible insights. That's part of the wonder of the world of Torah. It's part of the miracle of Torah. I never forget that every time I study or read Torah, this text that is perhaps 2,600 years old as it is, it continues to be alive. We continue to sing Eitz Chaim, the tree of life. Things which happened so long ago and seemed so relatively unimportant become very important. When the Mishkan was built and how it was built and what were the materials used, each one of those things actually have significance, we learn. After all, in its time, this was going to be God's dwelling place. Highly skilled artists and artisans used their gifts to construct and adorn a sacred space. And the brilliant aesthetics were to reflect the individual lives that were woven together like a past tapestry to form a nation that was being built. Certain objects that were once considered to be so mundane all of a sudden were repurposed, and they had sacred use. At the end of the Parsha, we get a glimpse into the life of one of these objects. These were the lavers. They were bronze basins which the priest would use to cleanse himself before he entered into the Mishkan. And what we learn is that they were made with the mirrors of the women who crowded at the entrance to the tent of meeting. The lavers were made with the women's mirrors. Where did the mirrors come from? What was their significance for the identity of the Jewish people? The biblical text is rather short, but the Midrash recounts a very powerful story. Pharaoh originally sought to limit Israelite population growth, not only by imposing harsh labor, but he also attempted to enforce celibacy. Pharaoh commanded the men to work really hard, day and night, bifarech, we read, and they shouldn't sleep at home, so perhaps they would not have relationships with their wives. But the wives responded according to the Midrash. The Israelite women, they brought food and wine to their husbands in the field. And when they had eaten and drunk, now this is in the Midrash, they, the women, would take out their mirrors and they would play a game with their husbands. They would tease them. They would hold up their mirrors and they would say, "Look how beautiful I am." And he would say, "Look how beautiful I am." And then this erotic banter would get them aroused. And as a result, their numbers increased there in the wilderness. Like the survivors of the DP camps, death and despair would not have the final word on these slaves. In a place which devalued and dehumanized life, the women devoted themselves to creating new life. Often demoralized and exhausted from their work in the fields, they looked at their own reflections, and what they saw was beauty and dignity. What they saw was a future that they could provide. They saw life beyond Egypt. Now, these were the mirrors that the women contributed to the creation of the wash bowls in the Mishkan. The rabbis continued to comment and said at first Moses refused to accept those mirrors because he thought mirrors were tools of vanity. But God steps in to teach Moses a lesson. God said, "Moses, these mirrors gave hope and life in Egypt." In a play of words, the rabbis made this very clear. The mirrors made the people feel beautiful and attracted them to each other. A number of years ago, I spoke week after week during the book of Exodus, based on a book written by Leon Kass, Dr. Leon Kass. Kass wrote this incredible book about the book of Shemot. It's entitled Founding God's Nation. And he emphasized how each part of the story and every actor in the story has a place in our national project. Moses, the people, the artists, the priests, men and women, and their God. And we see much more than a sanctuary was being built there. We saw they were creating a culture. We are people who came into being because of a God of life. We are a people who were told above all that we should choose life. And we honor the contributions of every member of our community. And we should be a people who honor the contributions of all people, including people who are pushed to the margins. The priests who were leaders and authority figures in ancient Israel had to purify themselves every time they walked in to give service for the people to God. And they washed with water, which symbolized defiance, resistance to illegitimate authority, and continued to express the persistence of love and the power of hope. A great contemporary Bible scholar and teacher from Yerushalayim named Aviva Zornberg brought our attention to a verse in the Talmud that said, "It was the reward for the righteous women of that generation that Israel was redeemed from Egypt." She speaks a lot about the power of women in the society. She wrote, "The women act as God had done at the beginning of creation. They created and they nurtured life." She wrote beautifully, and that is in the simplest way, the true meaning of redemption. From the experience of the women in the DP camps and the experiences of the women in the wilderness, we derive a principle, and that principle is the following. We are always obligated to create and to nurture life. The Israelite women employed the tools that were available to them, mirrors. But the tools employed to them also included something else that's not outside of us but within us. And that is courage and the capacity to love in order to build a better future. Not just for ourselves, but more importantly, for our children. and for future generations. We're called upon to resist the oppression and use the tools available to us to nurture life, to create a vibrant and flourishing future. That was our response back then to slavery and oppression. And it should remain our response, and we should feel very comfortable speaking about it. Nurturing life, showing and giving love, and never allowing ourselves to lose hope. The mirrors which may have originally been instruments of vanity and self-regard were transformed into sacred vessels and would lift up the entire community for the purpose of living with hope. And we must do so also. We must lift ourselves up. We must lift ourselves up to continue to work for freedom. And we do so by continuing to hope and continuing to love those closest to us and all people. That's our job. We have to look at ourselves and realize that real beauty is emanated from each one of us, and that each one of us has great power. And we have the capacity to withstand the difficult times, and we have the capacity to work together and build hope and build a better world. That has to be a message that comes from the sanctuary, that we can work together, but we can't lose hope. We can view the ugliness in the world, but we cannot let go of the vision of our own beauty. Shabbat Shalom.